What if I told you that being a great communicator at work is not about being the loudest or having a big personality? It's all about 5 secret communication choices that determine whether people listen and trust you or not. Because you can be incredibly smart and still be overlooked. You can have a great idea and still struggle to get people behind it. You can work hard, deliver results, and still find yourself thinking, why does nobody seem to notice what I'm doing? I know this because I've made every one of these mistakes myself. I've tried too hard to sound impressive. I've softened my own ideas, but now the way I speak has completely changed. As an instructor at Columbia University, a former Emmy Award-winning TV journalist, and someone who has taught over 2 million professionals how to communicate with confidence, I learned something important. Communications is not about forcing how smart you are onto other people. It's about connecting what you know to the things people care about. Let me say that again. Someone is seen as a great communicator because they can make what they want to say relatable. Because let's be frank, with AI leaders now saying we're heading towards this world where AI is outpacing human intelligence, well, our ability to connect, influence, and build trust is what's going to set us apart. So today, I'm really excited to be bringing together 5 of the most powerful communication tips from my most popular videos. And I'm going to be doing this in a very special way. I'm going to be compiling all the best tips right here, right now, so you have everything in one place. And make sure you stay until the 5th point because that one is one of my absolute favorites. It's actually one of the simplest ways to become more visible at work without feeling like you're bragging or being pushy. So let's begin with the first communication skill that has changed the way I've spoken entirely. Point number 1, clarity. Stop trying to impress people. The first lesson is the foundation. If you keep trying to impress people you're talking to, you're basically missing the whole point of what communications is. Communications is a two-way street, and people are only compelled to listen to you if they feel like what you have to say is useful, relatable, and interesting. But if you're thinking, am I sounding smart? Well, your mind isn't focusing on, again, what matters, which means the better question you want to ask is, what does this person need to hear? That's the shift. It's from impressing to serving, and it's what helped me to become a much clearer communicator. And here's the exact tip that changed it all for me. Here's the first thing I did that completely transformed my communication skills. I stopped trying to impress people and started thinking about what other people needed to hear. Let me take you back to when I first started working on TV. I was young, I was ambitious, and honestly, I thought that in order to get people to respect me, I had to put on this armor of bravado so people would take me seriously at work. But here's what happened. I failed big time. What I was doing was walking into meetings desperately trying to impress people. For example, I would speak like a robot, use tons of technical words, load everything with data and proof to build credibility, and make myself sound intelligent with sophisticated language because I thought it would make me look smarter. I tried this for a few months like I had something to prove, but one day, my boss noticed this and she did something that shook me to my core. After a meeting one day, she pulled me aside and said, Jess, I know you're smart and hardworking. It's why we hired you. But it would really help you a lot if you could just simplify your points before you speak. Imagine hearing that from your boss. Honestly, while that sentence hit me so hard at the time, in retrospect, I think it was one of the best advice I ever got. Because I realized that up until that point, I hadn't just been talking like a robot, really stiff, really unnatural, just to get people to think of me a certain way. But as a result, every time I spoke, it wasn't resonating or connecting. Now, if you're a smart person, chances are you're like me. You do have all the data and the facts prepared before a meeting. But the problem is what psychologists call the curse of knowledge. And this is the idea that once you know something deeply, you lose the ability to imagine what it's like to not know it. Meaning you skip steps, you assume context. You go into your meeting speaking in a way that assumes everyone knows what you're talking about. And that was exactly what my boss meant. I needed to simplify my points, uncomplicate them, and really put others at the center of what I was saying. And that was it. When people understand what you're saying, they'll be impressed, not the other way around. You do not have to prove that you know everything. You have to make it easier for other people to understand what matters. And once you stop trying to perform intelligence, you create more room for something even more powerful. And it's what I call influence. Because influence does not always come from telling people what to think. Sometimes it comes from asking the questions that help them think more clearly for themselves. So this next tip is point 2, influence. Ask questions instead of telling people what to do. Most people think influence is about having the strongest argument, the strongest speaking, the biggest personality, the biggest voice. But actually, the most influential people often do something very different. They ask questions that allow other people to feel like they were part of the conclusion. When people feel that they arrived at an idea, they are much more likely to support it. Here's exactly what I mean. And here's what I want you to know. The most important and powerful people in the room, they never make this communication mistake of assuming data is enough. You have to be able to connect with people on an emotional and human level, because once they feel that, you truly become the person who can influence, gain respect, and accelerate your own career growth. So do you see what influence is? You're not being passive. You're not shrinking yourself. You're simply creating this environment where the other person can engage with you and your ideas rather than feeling like it was imposed on them. Because I will tell you, that is the mark of true influence. In fact, in my premier communications program called Present by Soulcast Media, I always reiterate this to our members in our group because I always tell them that influence is a true outcome of communications. Isn't it? Every month when I teach a new communication topic to help people become better communicators, I always remind our members that we learn to communicate so we can influence our manager, we can influence our team, and how we can do it with authority and authenticity. By the way, if you're loving this video, don't forget to hit subscribe right now, because as an instructor at Columbia University and a best-selling author, I am personally committed to helping you build the communication skills so you can start to carry yourself with that confidence in all environments in front of all people. This isn't something destined for somebody else. It really can be you. And all you need to do is just watch and enjoy these videos that I release every week. So subscribe right now so you never miss a video when it drops. Which really brings me to my next point. Point 3, authority. Use smart words and stop minimizing your expertise. The third communication skill is really about the small words that might quietly weaken our authority. These are words like saying, I just want to add something. This might be a dumb question. I think maybe we should. Sorry, can I jump in? You see, many of us use these kinds of phrases because we want to be polite or we want to be humble. But humility is not about making your ideas smaller before anyone has even heard them. In this powerful video, you will hear what kind of words you want to avoid. Because here's what I hear over and over again from the smartest and most talented people I work with. They all share a common frustration. It goes something like this. I work hard, I deliver, but I don't feel like I get noticed for it, let alone rewarded with promotions or even new opportunities. Why is that? Here's my answer. It's not about working harder or piling on more work to prove your worth. It's about communicating smarter. In fact, it's not even about being the loudest person in the room because that's not everyone's style. It's about being intentional. So let's get into this. Here are the 5 phrases smart people use to get noticed at work that most professionals never say. Phrase 1, say, I hear what you're saying. That tip was a powerful one, right? You heard exactly the kind of phrases to avoid, and you see, sounding smart and articulate does not mean you need to sound forceful. You can be warm and direct at the exact same time. You can be respectful without making your expertise disappear. And there's another side to building credibility, and that is just as important as sounding confident. Making people feel like you're actually listening to them. Because people may remember your idea, but they will definitely remember how you made them feel in the conversation. And I believe that is one of the most important things that makes somebody a great communicator. Which brings me to the next tip, point 4, trust. Use reflective listening to build trust with others. Now, this is one of my favorites because it's so subtle, but it's a powerful tip. Right now, most people speak in a way like they're trying to impress people, their boss, their team, and they often do it in a way where they're defending themselves. But I'll tell you, to actually build trust, you have to make people feel like you heard them. That is why this sentence is so powerful. You want to say, can I make sure I understand what you're saying? Here's where I explain this in more detail. So here's the first question that instantly helps you build trust. Ask, can I make sure I understand what you're saying? So simple, right? I'm going to say it again so you can really feel the weight of this. Ask the question, can I make sure I understand what you're saying? But it doesn't end there. After you ask this question, you repeat what you heard in your own words. And here's why this is so effective. 99% of people don't do this, and it completely catches the other person off in the best way because they feel acknowledged, they feel seen and appreciated. And what does that do? They like you and they trust you. Now, if you're like me, you might wonder, well, if this is so effective, why don't more people do it? Because most people, when someone is talking to them, they are already formulating their response in their own mind. They're thinking about what they want to say. They're reframing, defending, and problem solving in real time, meaning they're not actually listening to the essence of what the other person is saying. Now, I'll be honest with you. Early on in my career, I was terrible at this myself. I remember being in an editorial meeting as a journalist, and whenever someone would push back on my idea, I would immediately jump to defend it because I thought that's what confidence looked like. You push back, you hold your ground, right? But what I noticed over time was that the people in the room who had the most influence, who everyone trusted, they did something differently. They paused and they asked, can I make sure I understand what you're saying? And then they briefly restated what they heard and they invited others into the conversation. In fact, research backs this up. A study out of Harvard Business School found that people who ask reflective questions and mirror back what they've heard are rated higher in trustworthiness and competence by their partners, not because they agreed, but because the other person felt understood. In psychology, when someone feels heard, their nervous system actually settles and their brain stops defending. And in that more open state, trust becomes possible. So the next time someone you're trying to build trust with speaks, respond with, let me make sure I understand what you're saying. Reflect it back to them and watch what happens to the energy of the room. This is such a powerful tip because it's not something people will learn in school. And I'll tell you, rarely people are going to tell you this tip. But this shift to reflect what you heard is not about agreeing with everything someone says. It's about showing that you understand, you see things, And that distinction matters because when people feel heard, they are more likely to hear you. So now we have clarity, influence, authority, and trust. But there's one final skill that turns out good communicators always think about, and it helps them build visibility. Because even if you communicate brilliantly in the moment, people may not remember the conversation later, which brings me to the next point, point 5, visibility. Make your follow-up feel new. This 5th tip is one of my favorites because it solves a problem many smart professionals really struggle with. And you might relate to this one. How do I follow up with people without sounding annoying? Now, the answer is not to repeat the exact same request again and again. The answer is to give people a reason to re-engage with you. This video is where I tell you exactly what to say. Now, for some of us, following up can make us feel uneasy because we don't want to be seen as pushy. We might assume, I asked one time, that's enough. Or if I bring it up, we're going to bother them. This is a mindset that must be eliminated because following up is always a part of the ask. Now, I want you to think about it as following up is a must do, not a nice to do. But you want to approach it with what I call tact. Here's an example. When you're following up because you haven't heard back from your initial ask, instead of just saying, hey, I want to follow up, instead, I want you to do this. I wanted to follow up with you because since our last conversation, I looked into this a little bit more, and here's some new information on why this is a direction we should go. Take a look. Did you catch that? In my follow-up, I added a new piece of information. That strategic placement suddenly made my follow-up now sound timely. It made it sound fresh and new. That is a smart way to follow up, and it doesn't appear pushy. So many people hate following up, right? But now you know there is a difference between repeating yourself and advancing the conversation. Repeating yourself is you saying, I'm still waiting for an answer. Are you there? Adding something new says, this is my idea, and this is how I'm moving forward, and this is why it matters now. That is smart visibility. You're not asking people to pay attention to you for no reason. You are helping them understand why your idea, your work, or your request is still important. So let's bring these 5 communication skills together. The first is stop trying to impress people and focus on what they need to hear. The second is ask questions that help people arrive at the conclusion with you. And the third is remove language that minimizes your expertise. And the fourth is use reflective listening to make people understand you. And the fifth, make your follow-up valuable by adding what's new. Now, these may look like 5 separate tips, but put together, they create a communication system. Now, to pull it all together, I really want to show you how these fantastic tips, how this can look like in a real life scenario. So here's an example. Imagine next week, you have an idea that you want to bring to your boss about improving a process at work. Here's how you could approach the conversation using these 5 things you just learned. First, focus on what they need to hear. So you might say something like, the main issue is our current process is creating a delay for our clients, and I want to show you one change that could reduce that delay. You see, you're not beginning your suggestion with every little detail and brain dumping everything. You are giving the listener, which is your boss, the main point and the reason why it matters at the very beginning. That's smart. But second, now you ask a question. That creates participation. So you could say, what do you think is really getting in the way of us solving this right now? You are strategically trying to understand what matters to your boss during this conversation. So as you're talking with them, you can best tailor your recommendation, your answers to what they need to hear. Third, remove your minimizing language. So instead of saying, I just want to suggest something that may or may not help, You want to say, I hear what you're saying, and here's what I am recommending we do. Fourth, listen reflectively. Now, if your manager says the biggest concern is money, you could respond with, your main concern is that this could create a lot of additional costs. I hear you. Well, my recommendation, I will tell you, the cost would stay roughly exactly the same as what it was the last few years. And fifth, follow up with what's new. So let's say a few days pass and you might then write an email to your boss and you would say, here's what's new since we last spoke. I reviewed the cost implications once again, and I identified a way to test the process with a smaller group first to ensure it's really aligned and cost efficient. Wow. That is a full circle use case of all 5 of these points in a real life situation. Now, I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 communication skills did you love the most? Let me know in the comments below. Also, if you want to go deeper on any of these topics, my book, Smart Not Loud, is linked below. And if you want my free guide on how to communicate with clarity and confidence, just comment the word SMART below because I will DM you directly this link to download that guide. And of course, if you loved this video, be sure to subscribe and like it right now because that is how you're going to get notified of all our future videos coming out to help you get promoted, build visibility, and of course, communicate with confidence. I'll see you in our next video.